In 2022, we saw 7 champions lose their belt. That goes for light heavyweight, middleweight, welterweight, lightweight, flyweight, women's bantamweight, and strawweight. And it shows you that these days, it's much harder to become that dominant champion that you used to see before. And I see the exact same thing for 2023. I don't think there's going to be a lot of champions that are going to keep their belts. So let's predict what the champions are going to look like by the end of the year. And we're going to start with the heavyweight division. The champion is Francis Ngannou. Now, the thing that we have to point out about heavyweight champions are they usually do not defend their belts more than once a year. The last time the belt was defended twice a year was in 2018 when Stipe fought Francis and Daniel Cormier. In 2017, the belt was defended once. In 2019, 20, 21, and 22, the belt was defended once per year, which means that we might only see one title defense in the heavyweight division, which could spell that Francis Ngannou might stay as champion, or he leaves the sport and the belt gets vacated. If the belt gets vacated, then things get a bit interesting. So if the belt is only defended once a year, I believe the champion by the end of the year will still be Francis Ngannou, but if the belt is defended twice this year, I believe that Ciryl Gane will be your heavyweight champion by the end of 2023. The only thing about Ciryl Gane is he has to watch out for Curtis Blaydes, where I think Blaydes is his most dangerous matchup, so if Gane fights Blaydes before fighting for the belt, I think that Ngannou will stay as champion, but if Gane is able to fight Francis again, I think he would be able to beat him. So, if the belt's defended once this year, I'm sticking with Ngannou. But if it's defended twice this year, I'm going to go with Ciryl Gane. Now, the light heavyweight division is an interesting one because many things can happen. You do have the possibility of Yuri Prochazka, the former champion, who didn't lose his belt, to come back by the end of the year. And we also do have Glover Teixeira versus Jamal Hill this month. The light heavyweight division does get defended more often than heavyweight, so we might see 2 title defenses in this year, especially with the fact that there's going to be a champion by January. So by the end of the year or the fall, we might see a title defense. Because if Yuri comes back by the fall, and that's when the belt gets defended, then we won't see anybody else fight for the belt, right? Yuri Prochazka is going to fight immediately for a title. And that's going to be probably a rematch between him and Glover, or it's going to be a match between him and Jamal Hill. And I do favor Yuri to beat both these guys. So, if Yuri comes back, I see him ending the year as a champion. But if he does not come back and the injury is really as bad as they're saying, we have Magomed Ankalaev, which I believe is the best fighter in the division. I believe if Magomed fights for the belt, no matter who it is against, I think he's going to win that. I think he's the nightmare matchup for Glover Teixeira because of his takedown defense and the fact that Glover is super aggressive with his hands. He'll expose himself to those counter shots. Magomed is one of the best counter strikers at 205. I believe he also beats Jamal Hill because of his wrestling skills. So if Yuri does not come back and Magomed fights for the belt, I believe that Magomed Ankalaev is going to end the year as a champion. And then there's the wild card. Because of potential star power, Alex Pereira comes up to 205 and fights for the title if Glover loses to Jamal Hill. Because if Glover is the champion, then Pereira is not going to come up. But Pereira is such a big guy, he is absolutely a good size 205er. And I believe if he fights Jamal Hill, he beats him. If he fights Yuri Prochazka, he beats him. He loses to Magomed Ankalaev, and he would probably lose to Jan Blachowicz. But the thing is, he would most likely fight for the belt next. Which means that the only way that Alex comes up is if Jamal Hill beats Glover. They set up that story, Alex Pereira gets revenge for his master, and he would absolutely end the year as a champion because of that. Unless he wants to get more active and fights once more, he's going to probably fight Ankalaev or Yuri. I think he beats Yuri, but he loses to Ankalaev. There is a possibility that Alex Pereira can also end the year as a 2-division champion. So that's essentially what I'm going to. If Yuri comes back, I think he's the champion by the end of the year. If he doesn't come back and they just go to the next contender, I believe Magomed Ankalaev is your most likely end-of-the-year champion out of all these options. And then there's a possibility with the wild card of star power where Alex Pereira comes up to 205 and wins the belt against Jamal Hill, and it goes back down to 185 to defend that belt. So the most likely champion by the end of 2023, I believe, is Magomed Ankalaev. And then we go to the middleweight division where the champion is Alex Pereira. And Alex Pereira is most likely going to defend his belt against Israel Adesanya, and the middleweight title does get defended more often than the higher weight classes. So we're going to see 2 or 3 title defenses in 2023. The first one is going to be against Adesanya, and I believe Pereira will beat Adesanya. So who would be next? There's 2 guys that could fight Pereira by the end of the year. That is Robert Whittaker, who I think beats Pereira, and then hear me out, I think there's Hamza Chimaev. I believe Hamza Chimaev or Robert Whittaker are the only 2 guys that will fight the champion by the end of the year, which means whoever fights Pereira by the end of the year will become the champion. Whether it's Whittaker that gets it or it's Hamzat that gets it. And I think that Robert Whittaker will get the title shot before Hamzat does. So, because of that, I will say by the end of 2023, Robert Whittaker will become your middleweight champion. And just to talk about if Adesanya does beat Pereira in the rematch, things change a bit because I don't think Whitaker will get a third fight with Adesanya in that situation. I think actually they'll throw up Hamza Chimaev instead. And I believe Hamza will beat Israel Adesanya. But ultimately, I am going to pick Robert Whitaker to become your champion by the end of 2023. And then we go to the welterweight division. And this is possibly the most difficult one to predict. I will say this in Bantamweight. Your champion right now is Leon Edwards. Leon is going to be defending his belt against Kamaru Usman, but there are some rumors going around that Usman is hurt right now. He has an injured hand. I don't know how much of that is true, but let's just say that the title defense happens. Title defenses happen much more often in welterweight, where Usman is actually defending his belt 3 times a year. And we know that Leon is probably going to be active as well, defending his belt at least twice. So we'll say this. Leon goes and fights Usman. Usman is definitely the favorite to win that, but Leon definitely has a chance here. So who are going to be the most likely champions by the end of 2023 that would fight either Leon or Usman? In my opinion, there's only 2 options. There's Colby Covington, and there's Hamza Chimaev. I don't believe anybody else is going to warrant a title shot unless Shavkat does something crazy. I think guys like Bilal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns, I don't think they're going to get title shots. I think they're going to be permanent top 5 ranked fighters. And guys like Shavkat Rakhmonov is going to wreak havoc against these kind of guys. So I can see Shavkat fighting for a belt next year, but not this year. For this year, I believe your welterweight champion is going to be Hamza Chimaev. I could see him fight Colby Covington. I see him potentially beating him. And if he goes up and fights Leon Edwards, Edwards is getting destroyed. Like, let's be honest here. Leon's not going to be able to do much to Hamza. And then there is also Usman, who potentially could get out-wrestled. Hamza's much bigger than him. And with his boxing skill game much better and be more disciplined in his fights, because of learning from his performance against Burns, Hamza's also much younger, and I don't see Usman being the same guy after that knockout. Whether he beats or loses to Leon, I don't think we're going to see the same Usman. Being close to 36 years old, getting knocked out, going into another fight with Leon where he might get hurt again, then going to a training camp to prepare for a marauder like Hamza Chimaev. I believe time is on Hamza's side. I believe it would be the changing of the guard. Hamza's getting so much better in his fights. He's very confident in his fights, and he might be the only guy that could out-wrestle Usman. So because of that, no matter who the champion is, I believe Hamza Chimaev is going to get that belt. And then we go to the lightweight division. I think this is like the easiest one. The champion right now is Islam Makhachev, and I don't think that changes. Islam Makhachev is going to end the year as a champion. I don't really see anybody beating him, especially for who can fight him in this year. We did hear that Khabib is going to retire from coaching, and we don't know how that's going to impact Islam, but I don't think it's going to change too much. I think Islam is a very intelligent fighter. Javier Mendez is good enough as a coach. I don't really see anybody beating him. There's a potential that he could fight Rafael Fiziev, and Fiziev can present some problems, especially if he could stuff a lot of those takedowns. Oliveira is always going to be some of a dangerous fight, especially if he approaches it correctly. But the amount of times that Oliveira gets hurt, I just don't see it happening against Islam. And then we go to the featherweight division, and I believe this is also an easy one to predict. Your champion is Alexander Volkanovski, and I don't think that changes. I think Volkanovski ends the year as a champion. He's way too good everywhere. He's way too dominant. He's potentially the best fighter I've ever seen, skill-wise. And right now, I don't see anybody even coming close. Unless Zabit comes back. But Zabit needs a tune-up fight. If Zabit actually returns to the sport, he's the only guy that interests me in a top 5 guy that could fight Volkanovski. There is Ilya Topuria, but I don't know if Topuria would beat Volk. I think that fight would most likely happen next year, not this year. So because of all that, I'm going to go with Alexander Volkanovski end of the year as a champion. And then we go to the Bantamweight division, and this is the toughest one. This is the hardest one to predict. Your champion right now is Aljamain Sterling, and I think he's fighting Henry Cejudo. I don't know, man. There's rumors going around, and Cejudo was saying that Aljamain is dodging him. He's not signing the contract. He's not fighting. There's something going on, maybe negotiations and stuff like that, which you do have to respect. But there's so many good fighters here that could be a champion. Aljamain can keep the belt. Henry Cejudo can take it. Peter Yan could take it. O'Malley could potentially take it. I don't really think so, but there's Chito. Song Yadong will get much better. I believe he's on the skill level of some of these guys as well. Corey Sandhagen. There's so many great fighters that could be your champion. It's hard to really pick which one's going to take it. Now, Sterling seems to be taking some time with taking fights and stuff like that. So if he goes and fights Henry Cejudo, we're just going to say for argument's sake, I think Cejudo might be too much for Sterling. At least stylistically, it's his toughest matchup. It's the best wrestler in the UFC. He has some of the best takedown defense, especially with Aldo out. Crazy power, way faster than Sterling, and just overall a better striker. The only thing that Cejudo's gonna have to watch out for is the reach and exposing his neck in any kind of scramble. Sterling would not necessarily just take it to the ground. He'll scramble his way down in some chaos. And from those situations, Sterling is very quick to catch your neck. But I think ultimately the Cejudo should be able to beat Sterling. So who beats Cejudo? O'Malley doesn't. I don't think Chito does. I think the wrestling's too strong against both those guys. In fact, I think O'Malley's chances against either Sterling or Cejudo is not too great because of their wrestling. Now, I think Chito has a better chance against both of those guys, but I think he loses to both those guys as well. There is Peter Yan, but the thing about Peter Yan is he's such a great fighter. He's potentially the best fighter in the whole weight class, but the rules and how everything is structured is completely against the way he fights. He fights in a way where it's hard for him to win a decision, even though he's clearly shown to be the more skilled fighter. For an example, he takes too many rounds off, and he'll lose those rounds because of it. Or he'll knee someone when they're grounded. Or there's not enough rounds for him to showcase his skills, right? He's much better in 5-round fights than 3-round fights. I don't think Corey Sandhagen can beat Sterling or Cejudo, and I don't think Song Yadong does either. So I'm going to say the fighter that ends the year as a champion is Henry Cejudo, and the big reason for that is, number one, I think he beats Sterling and he beats the majority of the weight class, and number two, I think he's going to try to go up to featherweight after, at least negotiate, taking up a lot of time in trying to fight for the featherweight belt, which will end the year for him as champion by default. And then we go to the flyweight division. I think this one's pretty easy. Deiveson Figueiredo is the champion. I think that doesn't change unless he goes up to bantamweight. If he goes up to bantamweight, but then again, if Cejudo is the champion, Deiveson would never fight Cejudo, right? They train together. There is a possibility that Cejudo vacates the bantamweight belt after winning it, goes up to featherweight in order for Figueiredo to fight for the bantamweight title. That is a scenario that might happen, but that is so much speculation. We'll just say Deiveson stays at flyweight. I don't think anybody really beats him. Moreno has a chance. Even Kai Kara-France has a chance. But I just think he's too powerful, man. And then we go to the women's bantamweight division. And this one, I'm going to have a bit of a different take here. Your champion is Amanda Nunes. But I predict that Nunes retires in 2023. I think your new champion by the end of the year is going to be Ketlen Vieira. I think Ketlen Vieira, who has already beat Holly Holm, who's in the top 3, I think could potentially also beat Irene Aldana and other fighters in the weight class like Juliana Pena for sure. I think her only challenge will be Aldana. I think your champion by the end of the year is Ketlen Vieira. For the women's flyweight, we don't really have to go down it. Valentina Shevchenko is going to stay as champion, whether she fights Taila Santos again, Jessica Andrade, Tatiana Suarez because she is returning, or even Zhang Weili. I don't think anybody's really going to beat Valentina. And then for the strawweight division, your champion right now is Zhang Weili, and people are probably thinking that I'm going to say Rose Namajunas is going to defeat her due to the fact that she beat Zhang Weili twice already, but I'm actually not going to say that. I say that Zhang Weili ends the year as champion, and that would mean that she would beat Rose in the third fight. The reason why I say that is I don't think Rose is in the best mental state. Not only from her Carla Esparza fight, her coaches don't seem to be doing an amazing job for her. And number 3, her grappling match against Jillian Robertson was not great to watch. That was really not good to watch, and she was making excuses afterward, and it just doesn't seem like she's in the best mental state, and Zhang Weili definitely is, and is getting so much better. Her wrestling is growing at such a rapid pace, training with Henry Cejudo. That may be the lone reason as to why she would beat Rose. When it comes to striking, I don't think she beats Rose, but because of her wrestling addition, I think she ends the year as the champion. So those are your champions for 2023. The majority of them are going to change. You see some former champions reclaiming their belts and some new champions for the first time. There's many things that can happen, many kind of decisions that the fighters will make in order to slow down their process of fighting contenders or even speed it up. Maybe we see the heavyweight champion finally defend the belt more than once a year. It's hard to predict what the fighters are going to do, but I have no doubt that 2023 is going to be a very special year for a lot of these fighters.